Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Save Our Children podcast. We're your hosts, Becky and Bridget. In this episode, we have our previous guest, Kevin Sutherland. If you are listening to this and haven't listened to Kevin's first episode, please stop this one and go back and listen to that episode as we are going to continue the conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us again. How have you been since we talked to you a couple weeks ago?
I've been really good, actually. I've been a bit all over the place, like up and down, but I've been fine, to be honest. I'm kind of like, I've been feeling a lot of anger recently, and I think anger is actually quite a good emotion because it gets stuff done. And rather than me feeling like sorry for myself or just feeling like that victimhood mentality, I think when you adopt anger, it gets me out of bed. It actually does. I've noticed it. So if I need to be that angry person just to get things done, then I'm kind of adopting that because it's given me the kind of strength to get up and deal with the things that I'm wanting to deal with and just fight all these multiple wars that I'm like so prepared to take on because I just feel like that's my motivation now. That's like my life.
That's awesome because it comes down to like, and I know anger, but it's like, it's just not fair. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start fighting you people for all of the stuff that you did to me all those years ago. And I've seen even on your, like we we're talking before, I've seen on your Instagram that you're starting to post stuff and call people out as they deserve to be called out.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's like, at night you sit and think and you're just like, no, that's not right. That wasn't right. And you're on the list as well, basically, and I'm just going through it. Like you've got, I think as well, see when you're dealing with like these sort of things and you're going up against systems, you've got to be quite sort of like strategic in how you battle it. You've almost like got to like run it like some sort of a system and sit down and really think and plan like, right, when's the best way to speak out? What's the best maneuver to make? It's like playing a game of chess.
Yes, totally is.
It's like playing a game of chess and I've got to like think, right, what's going to come back at me, who's going to say something, and what I've kind of realized as well is see with the mainstream side of it, right, because obviously I've been like putting a lot of things up and tagging newspapers and stuff that covered my criminal case, and I'm kind of like, well, you're quite happy covering my crimes against pedophiles, but where is your coming out and covering my child abuse story? But I was speaking with the person who's sort of like my support worker who deals with helping me go through when I go and give my evidence. And she was like, are you wanting to remain anonymous? And I was like, completely not. I was like, I want my name out there because it's so important because the two things are completely connected. My child abuse and care and what I ended up going on to do with these phone calls and blackmailing people, the two things are so intertwined and they've never been discussed or spoken about in that way. So I'm just like, name, face, everything out there because it's already been done before. I want to just correct the narrative and get the full truth, the whole truth. And, I'm going after the school, the journalist in particular, that guy. And I just want to hold these people accountable in whatever way, shape or form I can. It's weird because it's like justice is, it's like, how does it look for me? And obviously, like, I would love nothing more than to see, a one or two, if not all of these people actually sentenced to some sort of prison time. But I don't know whether that's feasible, what the options are, but I think more importantly, it's just been acknowledged, and for them to actually say we failed you and to actually have it in writing, like a proper acknowledgement and apology. That's what I'm seeking because it seems sadly more realistic than getting a conviction on somebody because it's so hard when it's like a historical abuse case because it really does come down to your word against theirs. And I think the police have just done everything in their past to sort of like discredit me. So I actually had an appointment to meet up with them yesterday, the police, but I sacked it off because I just thought, you know what, I need to be in the right mindset to deal with these fuckers, and I'll deal with them later on this week or the start of next week. But I'm feeling a lot more better about doing the inquiry stuff and talking about, like about all the abuse in the inquiry. Because I feel like more things are coming back to me. It's like opening a Pandora's box completely. Just little snippets and things of other incidents that I witnessed that I'm thinking that's definitely not right. Other abuse basically on other young people. And I'll be mentioning all that as well, because it's not just about my case, it's about maybe if someone else has reported something, then I can say that I've obviously witnessed that, because I recall quite graphic, as I said, I'm sure in the last time, quite graphic, violent episodes in that Kibble Education and Care Centre. So yeah, that's kind of where I am just now with stuff. Like, this is just my journey, and I need to address it. And I feel like this is my retaliation to the sheer abuse, neglect, and abandonment by the social work department, the childcare service, the police, and every other service and agency around them that was involved in the handling of my case as a child. Like, the time's up. I'm coming for each and every single one of yous. And I'm never going to stop talking about it until I get what I want out of it, you know, and probably I'll still talk about it after that as well. So like, that's just it. I'm going to, like, this is my drum and I'm banging it to that really important tune, you know.
I just really think it's, sorry, Bridget, I didn't interrupt. I really think it's important that people understand that something happened which causes the crime. That's the part that I think as if you're like, oh, see, he just blackmailed people, or see, he just did this. No. This thing over here that you did to him is what caused this reaction over here. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, we need to acknowledge that is what happened, and that's why it went.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on the mental health part of it, just because what you said is extremely important. As people go through different afflictions in their life, and as people start to go inner and face that trauma and try to get to healing, and it could be something minor, where what you went through, especially survivors, they're constantly getting attacked. And in the foster care system, there's so much trauma and abuse that happens that you guys don't even know what happened. It happened so young, and as you start to grow up and face certain things, you get those memories back, and you get the horrific, vivid memories where it's like, whoa, what did happen? So now you're trying to go back as you're going through that healing process and figure out why you are triggered in certain ways, or different things as you're going through healing and trying to see, when reacting, why you are the way you are. And so as you're facing that and trying to get records, it's protected by a corrupt system. So, and falsified documents. So you never actually get the truth. And the justice for you guys is not there, because our system is so corrupt. And like you said, it's like playing a game of chess, and it shouldn't be that way, where society protects the abuser. So I think that's an important aspect to touch on, because you even just coming out and saying, no, I want my name out there, I'm speaking my truth, that is already justice in itself, because now you are allowing other people and other survivors who've gone through something similar, or who don't have the courage to say, no, there is somebody else out there. It wasn't my fault. This happened to me, and it should have never taken place. And for those of you, especially media and people listening, who say, well, why are the survivors barely coming out 30 years later, or 20 years later, however long later? Or like, when you went through the whole blackmailing thing, like, you did that because that was your way of, I'm going to get my justice. And it's not like you didn't report it. You went through all the channels to do what society tells you to do, but those people are so protected, and they don't do anything but protect the abuser. So people really need to stop and listen to what survivors are saying, because the system is so corrupt that there is no justice. The only way of justice is going to be as a society when we start to accept that this is happening and this is real.
Yeah, no, totally true. I completely agree with every word that you said there. Like, that's just so true. And just to touch on, you know, how you're talking about like records and stuff, like, I don't know if you noticed, I put up about, you know, like, I don't care if my records have been destroyed, because like, you're right, they're not going to document, oh, today I done such and such. They're not going to document abuse. So these records are only, the only reason that I'm looking to get access to these records is really for some of the names, the full names of some of the people that worked there, because I've obviously forgot some of that. But they used to call them, they're like, when I was in my residential school, they were called the daily records, like their daily records of your behavior and whatever you're doing. That's just their opinion. So that's not going to coincide with accuracy and fact. And this is exactly how this situation played out. And so if they're destroyed, they're destroyed. I don't care. If anything, you know, if I do know the woman who's trying to uncover my records did say to me that when the first foster family that I was placed with, and this was a woman who used to, well, she did hang me upside down over a cold bath and used to put me in cold baths for wetting the bed and things. And that's all I remember. I don't remember what she looks like, any more details. I just remember the traumatic incident. Anything else around it, it's just blurry. They have no records of her. They can't find her. So there's been some sort of concealment around her. So this is going to be challenging, because that's kind of like, that's where it all began with regards to the care system. Hopefully they can find the records on the Australian guy, which was like basically stage 2 when I went into the care home there for a few weeks, and there was abuse that happened there with him. But just this complicity machinery, just like constant cover up, and it's like new lies to cover up old lies, and they just try and throw you off balance and distort you. And see, obviously, because I've been coming after Kibble quite publicly on my Instagram and stuff, and I'm also challenging them to get my records, part of me's thinking like, should I have held off? And it's like a bit late now. But see, because I've changed my name, they've got my records, they've acknowledged they've got my records now, so they can't really go back on it. But they wanted like full disclosure of deed poll and how I officially changed my name. And I gave it all to the woman. I said, that's fine. I says, but blur out the addresses and any additional information that's unnecessary for them to have. Because they don't need to know that information. They just need to know the proof of the name of change, but the name, like the name that I was, like the change of names sort of thing. But I just feel like and I think the letter was like, give us a further 60 days. So I'm going to get this information well after I give my evidence at the court inquiry. But I want it for the names and stuff, because I do feel it's hard, because I'm like, it's hard to kind of put into words. I'm hoping that when I speak to the police, they will take it more seriously, because it's like under the public domain now, because this child abuse inquiry is underway. And I'm hoping that, you know, if there is some sort of mainstream coverage around my case again, then it puts the spotlight back on them and stuff's kind of taken serious. So that's the only reason that I've kind of reached out to some of these media outlets. And it's weird, because like they've got back to me. A couple of them have reached out to me because they've seen my post, right? I could show you the emails, and it's now I'm just being hit with a wally deadly silence. Like, soon as I start to sort of send them like a bit, like basically like a written up press piece, I'm sure I've maybe shared it with you, or I shared it with Emma, and it's just like a breakdown of like what happened when I was 5, 6, 10, 14. And when I kind of pass that on to them, I'm hearing nothing back. So it's either either it's no salacious story that they want to cover, because it's child abuse and it's dark and it's something that or maybe I'm looking at, maybe it's the legality, maybe they're waiting until I've done the official part of giving my evidence. And I'm hoping that that's kind of why they've stood off from covering any aspect of my story until I give my evidence in court. I'm assuming it probably will be that, hopefully. Because how you could just sort of disregard all that and ignore it after they were so easy to cover my crimes against paedophiles and not actually cover, you know. And these are journalists, a few journalists I've reached out to that are well aware of my case, and I've emailed them obviously on their work emails, not just the news desk, and they've got back to me, and then it's just like, yeah, we're definitely interested in doing a piece, and then I'm hearing nothing. So only time will tell.
Right.
Well,
I hope somebody gets brave enough to do it, because that's some of it where it's like, ooh, that's not something I want to step into. And it's like, no, that's what you need to be stepping into and talking about. And so hopefully I'll keep my fingers crossed over here that hopefully after stuff comes out, that you're able to, like you said, give your evidence and do what you need, that these people will find their strength to start posting this stuff because it needs to be heard. And then again, that allows everybody else, other survivors out there to see that, you know what, we're talking about it.
Yeah. And I did ask the woman who's sort of like the coordinator support worker for the child abuse inquiry, I asked her specifically about Kibble. I said, are you familiar? Is there anyone else came forward? And she says not that she's aware of. And I said to her, well, it doesn't surprise me because I feel like they've managed to dodge being investigated for so long. And because they are, like, I don't want to use the word prestigious or elite or anything, because the school's nothing like that, but because they're kind of like higher than your normal daycare centre or whatever, because they've had the royals in to open them up and it all looks nice. And this is the weird thing, like my support worker, she says it's hard to kind of put you in a category, Kevin, because like Kibble had a day centre, a residential school, it also had an education centre, and now they're doing fostering. They do they do everything. They're
Yep.
basically like a big spider web. They're over every aspect of the care system. And I think the inquiry is dealing with they're dealing with foster care and then they're dealing with like boarding schools, residential schools, and Kibble kind of falls into everything. So I really hope somebody comes out about this school, like what I'm doing, and speaks up, because there's so many people that I witnessed being violently abused in that school.
And it's still open, correct?
It's still open, and it's expanded since I've stayed there. So since I've been there, they've now got a secure unit, and they now have a off-site campus foster service where some of the staff, I'm assuming from reading their website, they foster the children in proper homes in a more homely environment. So they're connected, they're connected with football clubs. They get donations from like Celtic, St Mirren, big football clubs in Scotland. So that they've got their antennae reach far and wide. They're connected politically, socially, so take it at that. I think that's how they've kind of avoided being investigated, because they're not just a council run care home, they're private, but they get council funding, private funding, donation, like the money's flowing from everywhere. So they've avoided any kind of real investigation. The only stories online that are negative about them are the 2004 previous whistleblower that worked there. And I think there was something in 2011 where there was a report about 2 staff getting caught having sex in one of the rooms or something like that. I don't know. But that's kind of like the minimum. They've always kind of managed to keep themselves out the press, whereas like, they're quite a high profile school for everything else, for all the good things that they do. But when it comes to the abuse and allegations and stuff, they've really kind of, I don't know, they've just managed to dodge every bullet, I think. And I think they obviously know that I'm surprised they've not blocked me since I've been putting up all this stuff online about them. Like, they've not blocked me. I think I have had a look through my story, and I've definitely noticed a couple of what I suspect former members of staff that I knew that have been coming on my page and looking at my page. So I think they're just not.
I hope they are people of integrity who are willing to, if nothing else, support you privately and let you know that they are like, yep, we agree with you, keep fighting the fight, whatever. If they are even better people, that they're willing to actually support you in your case and do what
is right,
what's needed. But yeah, that's really cool.
What you're doing is so powerful, especially because you do have a big following and you do have a powerful voice. Your case does have mainstream media on it, and it's a blessing and it's a curse. And I'm going to say that for the fact of, you are in a place now where mentally you are like, no, fuck this. The media has painted me out to create this narrative where you could have went off on a different route. And media often turns the narrative where people will go into depression, suicide. And don't get me wrong, survivors do have their ups and downs, and you have your own moments, but you've used that fire to say, no, fuck this, enough. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to get backed in this corner. I'm going to clear my name and I'm speaking the truth. And why that's so powerful is because it's a blessing for everybody else who has been through this trauma and they don't have the courage quite yet to come and stand up and speak that truth, because what you're doing and what you're fighting, the system is so big, goes so deep, and it all intertwines that most people, even in media, they won't stand up to it because of the names and the faces and the organizations behind it are so big. So for you to say, no, I'm willing to die and speak my truth and not be fearful of their tactics is a lot in itself, because there's so many tactics that are used. And there's even a mom in the UK where she even stood up for, at the school that her kid went to, who touched her kid, and literally the teacher went at the mom and the mom defended herself and put hands on him. She is like in the middle of a whole court process now, and she can't even leave her home because of what the media turned on her, that she's this angry, they threw the race card and that she's this angry black mom and this and that. It's like, no.
Is it that Shanty girl from
Yes.
Birmingham? Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched the live that she did, and that's just heartbreaking, because see, like what I said to you in the message, when I first read that story, the first thing that came in my head as a normal, logical, right-minded person, well,
Yep.
why did she attack the teacher? Like, that's a big why. They never covered the why. Because
Right.
you don't just go into a school and just attack the teacher. Why did that happen? And that's just been completely left blank. You know,
Yep.
they've just left a big massive hole there. So I think she's probably got a lot more support than she maybe realizes, because
Yeah.
most normal people would think, well, you don't just go into a school and attack a teacher or hit a teacher for no reason at all. You know, it just shows you how biased they are. They just
Yeah.
go with one. They're never impartial. They just go with one side. And from watching that live, it sounds like this guy is connected with a group, or it has associations or affiliations with someone that's helping protect them. But I just feel like the house of cards on this whole paedophilia shit is starting to really crumble, and people need to stop protecting these fucking bastards, because they're going against a system that is eventually, you know, it's getting exposed piece by piece and slightly, and people are getting shut down and censored and what have you here, but it's still coming out. People are really waking up to just how bad these systems are that are in place that are to protect children, when in fact they're abusing children. So I don't know what, you know, like she's on an assault charge, isn't she, for this incident with this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And his name's never mentioned, and he's like given anonymity. And the
But
weird
yet they
thing
gave
is,
her whole identity, her address. So like her and her kid can't even come out, and her kid doesn't even go to school. And then and just the laws over there, and how your kid basically has to be in school, otherwise they report it to the system, then your kid could get taken. So either way, it's a horrible situation. So
it's so seriously set up, eh? It's like the way that it's been manufactured. It's like people say the system's broken. The system's designed in a specific way. It's not broken. It's designed in a way that benefits
working
the system.
perfectly for them.
Working absolutely perfectly for them. And in any other normal assault case, right, where like say a guy goes out and gets into a fight uptown after drinking, they name both parties. So that's another red flag, that they're not naming this guy, and his name's been kept well out of it, which just makes you scratch your head and think more into it as to, well, why is he not being named, and why did she attack the teacher? You know, like that's, before I even watched that live, I seen it on one of I had already seen the story, and I just instantly thought to myself, you know, like, well, there's more to this than what's being reported. It's just a shame that that's the situation that she's in. It's horrible that, you know, a woman's got to go through that for just protecting her daughter. It's absolutely disgusting.
And that's what we need to do more as a society. And I know you said like folks with common sense are doing this, but we really need to be doing this. Like, why is this person in the news? Why is that person homeless? Why did your kid scream at you today? Why? Like, because everybody just wants to take whatever their response to it is, and that's what happens. No. Why did that happen? Your kid yelled at you today because they had a really rough day. How about being sympathetic to them or empathetic to them and coming in and finding out what really happened? How about instead of just believing whatever news story you read, you look into it and find out why someone, like you said, why a mom would just randomly, because everyone randomly goes around and beats each other up. What
Yeah.
happened that mom would do that? Oh, okay. So we found out the teacher was dirty. Okay,
Mhm.
well, that's a different story now.
Yeah.
But
It's
even
a
then,
story that's deeper, darker, and is much more worthy being on the front page of a newspaper than just an assault on a teacher. You
Right.
know, like, that's what blows my mind as to why they want to just kind of minimize the story. If they really wanted to, and it makes me think, you know, like it's all about supply and demand, right? And I know this is going quite deep here, but like I think as a society, we are kind of like at that 50-50 point where like 50% people want to hear this stuff, but there's a hardcore 50% of people that are still very much in the mindset of, let's just not talk about that, you know, let's just pretend that never happened. I'd rather read about a salacious affair with a celebrity and a footballer, just some bullshit crap that's just so irrelevant and just has no bearing on like real people's lives in the world in general. You
It's
know,
not that people don't, it's not even that people don't believe that this evil exists. They don't want to deal with the evil because once you know, you're responsible. And so
yeah,
people don't, it's like, nope, I just don't, like you said, I just don't want to know. I'd rather learn about some nonsense. I'd rather watch trash TV where my brain disengages and I
yeah,
don't have to do anything. Because if I know that these evil things are happening, I'm now responsible for helping, informing, learning more, whatever. And that applies to anything. That applies to the pandemic, that applies to all of it, that if you know more, you need to do more.
yeah,
And people don't want to do it. So it's just better not to know anything. Stick your head back in the sand and do nothing.
which
yeah.
is
It's like
so
that kind of
sad.
whole, you know, not in my backyard, you know, as long as it's not touched them personally, that's just like
Yep.
whatever.
And that's so sad because like even in that story, the only thing I could think of is the fact that that teacher is still working there. So me, any parent, like if my kid is at that school, I'm immediately at the front office with the principal to say, why is this teacher here? How many other teachers are doing this? And why is the school protecting this abuser and this pedophile and attacking the mother in this situation? So that just makes me think as a parent, if I was to do the same situation and protect my child, that this could potentially happen to me, but yet the school is allowing all of these kids to be around these pedophiles and they're not standing up and protecting the children. That's my first red flag. Like, why is he
Oh.
still walking back in the school?
Do you know if like any other parents have went to that school and like sort of spoke up for this girl and said, right, wait a minute here, what's going on? Because obviously my kid's in the same class or anything. Like, has she said anything? Because I never heard her say that in her interview, if I remember rightly.
No, all I heard is that it's happened at the school before. The school's well aware of the situation. He's done it to more than one child and
Mhm.
is still back at the school.
Oh, it's so fucked up.
So,
I
well, I
don't know
mean,
what to
then
say. I just hope that it, you know, that it goes well for her, you know, at court, and that she's able to get her story. It's weird because it's like I feel like see with the Me Too movement, they're very selective and cherry picking with who they want to cover stories with. And I
Mhm.
feel like we've also kind of like I'm kind of selectively picking certain journalists to try and see if they'll cover my, whereas I feel like it just should be universal. This should just be normal, decent humanity at its core. We shouldn't be having to look out for the good one. And when it comes to stuff like this, you know, like putting political stuff aside, everybody's got their views and whatever. But when it comes to this shouldn't be like well, this is what I think, you know, and oh, well, you think different and she thinks that. Like, this should just be a universal thing that people should be able to just see as wrong. It's so wrong.
and that goes back even in here, and I don't know if this story made it across the pond to you, but there is a lady in Philadelphia who was raped on a train for 8 minutes and nobody did a thing.
They
They
recorded it.
recorded it.
They recorded it and didn't do anything but
So
upload it to social media.
Yeah, and the
and
cops finally had to stop the train.
And did the person who raped her get like charged with it? I'm assuming with the evidence, or did it just what happened?
It's just happened, so I don't know if he was
Just recent, right?
Yeah,
Right,
it was just like within a week, but
right. No,
yeah, he had a
right.
rap sheet. He had a super long rap sheet too, from what I heard. But my biggest thing is like to your point, what's wrong with humanity? Like, why did nobody help? Why is nobody looking at your story and saying, wait, this was a little kid? Like, we need to start telling these stories of these kids that are now coming out and telling about their abuse. Like, this is humanity. This isn't about like you said, right or left, right or
Yeah.
left, this thought, this thing, whatever. It's just right. Like, it's just correct. This is what we need to be doing to be saving these kids.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's like what I put on my post. It's like, if people think that it's children's fault that they get abused, then they shouldn't have children. They should stay away from children.
Yep.
They should go and fucking live their life out in the desert, a million miles away from everybody. Like, there's a really old school generation that is gladly dying off like flies, I must say. And I feel like that's where a lot of this concealment and denial and cover up derives from. It comes from a generation of silence and cover up.
Yep.
And they're starting to die, like going to, like people in my family, you know, people that I know of personally, that would rather talk about, you know, what fucking fragrance somebody's wearing than talk about like real serious matters. Like, I've been arguing a lot with relatives and stuff recently, because obviously they're concerned about like what I'm doing and what I'm saying, but they're only concerned from the perspective of, am I going to name them?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's their only self-interest. They're not interested in what I've been through and what's happened to me as a child and what I'm voicing for and what I'm speaking up for. It's, oh, well, I hope you don't say anything bad about me. You know, it's like, what the fuck? Like, where's this? And what was it? Somebody else said, oh, I hope you're putting in a claim. And I'm like, fucking hell, like, this is serious, hardcore abuse that I'm talking about. And you're just looking at like the monetary aspect that's potentially there, and well, make sure you don't say anything bad about me. Like, I'm not going to name my relatives in any of the interviews that I do, because I don't feel that they're part of my story. And like what I said, like to this extended family that just turned a blind eye and allowed me to go into care at first, like, I have no words for them. And that's as far as it'll go. The shame factor and the naming factor comes down to the abusers. I can't put that on them as such, because they didn't do that. But the fact that they just turned a blind eye, they can live with that. They can take that thought, and if they've got a conscience, sit there and go over it in their head. But I'm certainly not going to be coming out on the attack on them. But it's interesting to kind of see the mindset on how people are kind of worried about that, you know, rather than being worried about, well, how are you dealing with it yourself, Kevin? Because you're having to fight this battle entirely by yourself. You've not got any kind of like real support, because everybody's too busy getting on with their own lives, as per usual. And that's what led to me going in care in the first place, because they were too preoccupied dealing with their own shit, like just day to day getting on with life. So it goes back to like how I said to you at the beginning, I'm fucking angry. You know, I'm angry, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because when I really sit back and think about it, it's just like the level of neglect and interest in me as a child is like as high as the abuse, if no higher. Because if the neglect wasn't there, the abuse would never have happened. So all parties concerned in that, family included, are being held accountable in some respect to that. You know, I've had it out with a lot of people face to face. I've sat down and spoke to them and said to them, you know, look, like, this is how I feel. And don't think that it's, you know, I don't just say it like on my mum's side and my dad's side, both sides, you know, both sides are just as equally accountable for just not giving a fuck, you know.
So do you have a relationship with your mom and dad, or is it just still a really strained sort of thing?
I do have a sort of relationship, but it's very, I don't know if the word clinical is even the right term to use, but it's there. Like, I don't sort of go off on it with them all the time. I think I've probably kind of got I wouldn't say I've got a better relationship with one over than the other. But I think because one of my parents was in the sort of care system when they were younger themselves, I can kind of connect a little bit more better with them. But yeah, it's just, it is what it is. We've never been a close family. We're very, very broken. Everybody lives their own lives individually. We've never really had like birthdays or family gatherings as such. I just come from a very, very selfish family. I've only got one sibling as well. And, like there was a time when we were, I would say, particularly quite close, but I think, they're dealing with their own wars and their own issues right now. But there's just been like 13 levels of degree separation put in between me and that person, just because I think they're too invested in their own head. And I'm not there, I'm not asking anybody to comfort me or to sit and listen to real hard, deep, heavy shit. I'm just asking for people to be decent and humane and show an interest, like what you guys are doing, showing an interest in stuff and making the uncomfortable things comfortable to talk about. They're interested, but they're only interested from like a perspective like what I've told you. If there's anything concerning them that gets said. Yep. And how other people are going to perceive it, and what other platforms I might go on and talk about, and if anybody maybe approaches them in the future and says, I watched this with your brother and that's really bad, like some of the stuff that some people have said since they've seen what I've been putting up with, obviously Emma, and I don't know if you have uploaded that last video yet. Have you done that? I don't think you have.
Not yet. I think it's going out. Yeah, it'll come out in 2 weeks, I think, is where we're at. So yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I get the feeling from the family aspect, that they're watching, but like I don't think, like for example, I don't think my mum's, I've sent her the links from the interview that I did with Emma, but I don't think she's watched the full thing. Like she's watched bits and pieces, but I don't think she's got this sounds really derogatory saying it, but I'm just going to say it, like the mental capacity to process that. Like that's just as simple. And I've said that to her face, you know what I mean? I sent it to my dad as well. I don't know if he's watched all of it. It certainly got the 2 blue ticks, and I've seen him recently and I mentioned it to him. But they're too invested in their day-to-day lives to care about what's going on with me until other people in their life start saying things to them about what they've seen me say. That's when they'll show an interest. And it comes back to that sad reality of people only support you when it looks like it's the popular thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that brings me to this whole Me Too thing, where it's like the cherry picking of survivors and how like somebody's only interested in listening to somebody's abuse story because it's got affiliations with a celebrity, and it becomes like I've watched so many Emma's podcasts and they're just normal, real people, and that's the stories that I want to hear, and that's the people's voices that need to be elevated. This whole picking a select few and almost making them like celebrities, it sends a really quite damaging message, I think, to survivors. It makes them feel very belittled. It brings them down, and it makes them feel even more suffocating. So when people sit on these huge platforms, right, and I'll name names, for example, like Rose McGowan and stuff like that, right, people who have got these huge platforms, they're so quick to argue with you, right? See, if I was to send her an abusive message or something, she'd bite back at that straight away. Now, I understand it, right? They're triggered, they're on edge, they've been abused, they've been through hell, but they're so quick to argue. But see, when it comes to helping somebody get their story out there, it's almost like they're not interested unless there's something in it that benefits them. And that's a horrible place to get to, because your mentality is moved from dealing with helping abuse victims and survivors and whatever to almost like it being some sort, I'm not talking about money, but becoming some sort of a transactional thing. Yes. And that's just where it goes all wrong, and she's read messages I've sent her. I've had conversations with her when I messaged her before, because there was a girl who worked on one of her documentaries, a lady called Emily, who's kind of fallen off the face of the earth. I was saying to Emma about this the other day, she was going to help me with something. I think the reason, like, the reason I know that, like, she's quite one of these people that's quite quick to have an argument with somebody is because I'd sent her a few messages, and how when you eventually select the option to view a message, you can't go back to having it unseen.
Yeah.
She had put something up on her post. I think this was maybe about 18 months, 2 years ago. It was ages ago. And I just responded to it going, Now that could be taken anyway, that could be taken in a good or a bad way, and straight away she opened it up. So it shows you that regardless of how many followers she's got, she goes through and reads each one of those messages individually that's sent. And the only reason that she opened mine up is because she thought it was like provocation into an argument about something when it wasn't. So then when I messaged her again, she kind of, I don't know if she felt like she needed to reply, but she replied, and it was about an album, you know, that album thing that she released, and it's got like music that's supposed to have similarities to that EMDR therapy. It's got some of the same sounds in it.
Oh, yeah,
And she replied, and I just, and I just found it interesting. So I just thought, oh, you know, you'll answer someday. And it's horrible that we're at that stage, that these people are more inclined to argue with you than to help you. That's the point I'm making. They're more inclined to sit down and have an argument with you when I'm not arguing with them than actually help you, you know? So that pisses me off as well.
Yeah. And I think too, even what you touched on is family dynamics and family secrets. People often protect their family because they're worried about how you're going to make the overall family image look like out to the public. Even in your own family, you're scared of your family getting out to whether it be a cousin or a different relative. You're worried about those family secrets. So I think too, I always say when people ask me certain questions, I'm like, what's the intention? Why are you asking me? Because, you know, I know certain people and I can pick up on it. I'm like, okay, so are you asking me to gossip to then go in your little circle and gossip within the family? Or are you asking because the intent is there and you actually care? Because if something was to happen to me, like majority of my aunts and uncles on my dad's side, they've never really contributed any positive role to our life. So like I completely see that aspect. And like oftentimes it's just all about the gossip. They don't really care and aren't going to be there if you fall, or if you were to say, hey, can you do me a favor? Or hey, I need something. Like they don't care until something traumatic has happened. Then it's going to say, oh, and are you going to make me look like I was complicit to this? So I totally get where you're coming from with that. And just if we can touch on as far as adversity, because you've dealt with so much adversity from the foster care system to social media, trolls, being a survivor, and just constantly getting attacked, and even in the media, how they made you out to be the bad person. How do you deal with adversity, especially where you are today in healing and trying to get justice?
I think how I deal with it today is I'm just so focused on like dealing with this that like if anybody was to say anything, like what I said in my post, like anybody that disagrees with my direction, I'm not even going to give life to that. Like I'm not going to be one of these people that's going to, and I get why people do it and I totally understand it, like if they get abusive messages and they want to out them and get into a sort of like argument. But this is the point I was sort of making before. I'm not going to invest my energy in all that arguing and petty side. It's just side shit. It's total deflection away from the point that like somebody's trying to make or whatever they're trying to fight for. So I just give no life to that. I think I've dealt with so much shit over my years that I've built up a high tolerance, and I'm pretty immune. I would never, like if somebody said something really, really over the top and deplorable, I would maybe respond. But I have had some of the worst things said to me by people, and it's always from the same demographic. So this is the thing, like I've never really experienced it on a scale like in social media. I've never experienced it from like just your random person from Manchester or York or London. It's always gay guys, specifically in the Edinburgh and Glasgow gay community, that come after me. Nobody else, absolutely nobody else. Why is that? I don't know. That's something that they need to deal with. But 99.9% of the time, whenever I've been attacked or trolled or somebody said some kind of nasty shit about me, they're affiliated with that little small circle of people that I have no association with at all whatsoever. And I think a lot of it's to do with just, and I know this is quite a weird thing to say, right? But see, because I've never really dealt with any shit regarding my sexuality, right? A lot of gay guys, I think, have a bit of a chip on their shoulder, right? and I mean this in the sense, say, like, they've had to fight battles, they coming out and all this crap, right? See, because my life has been so much more deeper and darker and heavier, I've never had to really acknowledge any of that. I've just been who I am, you know, so I've not kind of got that as a story to tell. But my point is, I feel that a lot of these guys can be very sort of like, you know, oh, well, I've been through this and this is really, and it's a comparison thing, the trauma comparing, and, you know, if they see me saying something, like, for example, when I was putting stuff up about that journalist and that, I did get a couple of messages from people. I just blocked them, but I just thought straight away, this is just because, you know, I'm airing something and you're quite a damaged, hurt person yourself. So you just go and deal with your shit. I'm not going to acknowledge you or even try to understand you. I just know that you're irrelevant to my situation. But I have noticed over the years that a lot of them do carry a sort of chip on their shoulder of just like, I know that sounds a really controversial thing to say, right? But it's just,
I don't think it sounds controversial. I think
do
it
you
sounds
get
like,
what I mean, though? Do you get what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it proves your healing, because
Yeah.
it gets to a point where you can say, because you could sit and react and fight them and be hitting all the time, but it's like, no, that's on you. You have the
Yeah.
issue. You need the healing. You have to do whatever. I've done my time. I've done my work. I know it's not related to me. I'm just going to block you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Makes total
Yeah,
sense.
it is strange though that is the demographic of people that come after me.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well. But I think because obviously the media spun it off as I was targeting gay guys and I was trying to blackmail them over their sexual orientation, even though people know, even just reading the articles on me, that, you know, it was deeper than that. It was nothing to do with sexuality. You know, the police's final statement was that we'll not tolerate any kind of action of hate towards people's sex, race, or gender. My crimes have nothing to do with sex, race, or gender. So that just shows you the police's narrative on it as well. So maybe that's where it plays into. Maybe people felt, because when I do recall years ago, not long after I got out of prison, I did get heavy bashed at that point. When I first said, I think it was, I can't even remember if it was on Instagram or what it was on, but I remember getting a lot of messages from people, and it was really fucked up. Like, people were saying shit to me like, I'm going to go to the police and say that you blackmailed me over this, that, and the next thing, and they're going to believe me because you've got a record. And I'm thinking, well, I'm screenshotting all these messages, so you're just fucking digging yourself a grave.
Yeah.
There's no blackmail that took place. But this is what I mean. There's just so many of them that are so irrelevant that I just would never really speak about it. But that is where the hate thing comes. It'll be interesting to see the more attention my story gets, right? It'll be interesting to see what other people come out for, you know, come for me. Obviously the school, the system, that's understandable. There's going to be backlash from them. But independent bodies like that community of people, big question mark, you know, why are you coming after me and hating down? What have I done to you directly? Nothing. So the more that my story gets out there, like, it's interesting to sort of like do a wee bit of an analysis and kind of work out like, well, why is it this people? Because it's never women, it's never a straight guy, it's always gay guys, and it's always people from that little select circle of people, you know. I've never experienced it from anyone else, but I suppose, I don't know. I don't get that, to be honest. That's a bit of a head fuck in itself.
Yeah. So last question before we get going here that I ask many of our guests is, if you were on an elevator with another survivor and you had to give them 30 to 60 seconds of advice based on your story and what you've been through, what would you tell them?
I would say to really own your truth. Do not allow people to fucking gaslight your version of events and reality. Stick to what you know and what you've experienced, like, and just be honest and speak the truth. And as much as I think it'll be a long journey for everybody involved. It's never going to just be straightforward and simple. Just be honest and just speak your truth. You don't need to. We're living in a culture where everything needs to be sort of amplified. You shouldn't feel the need to amplify or add things onto your story just to draw attention to it, just because the media only want to focus on celebrity aspects of people who've been abused. The whole Me Too movement is a celebrity movement that's been endorsed by celebrities to help celebrities from other celebrities. It is not there to help everyday people. And I'll say that to the end of the earth. It is full of bullshit as far as I'm concerned. It's corrupt as well. And the people that are in it are just full of shit. They're full of absolute fucking shit. I think it's the biggest amount of fucking crap ever, this whole Me Too. Like, it's like, what have they actually done? Like, realistically, boots on the ground, what have they done apart from put up posts and, you know, create a big hype in the media? That's it. See, raising awareness, that can only go so far. It's just noise around an issue. It's not actually helping anyone. So my message to people would be that, because I've seen how much that's affected me in itself. Just seeing that and feeling like these people are being they're overshadowing me with regards to being heard, that would be my advice to someone, because I think a lot of people feel that. I just don't see a lot of people coming out and saying that. And I think that's important in itself. That needs to be fucking, you know, there needs to be attention drawn to that, how we're selectively picking people, and we're selectively picking them based on the value of a story because it's got affiliations with someone high profile. So it basically sends out the message that if you were abused by somebody and they weren't high profile or in a position of power or well known, it's almost like, well, your story doesn't matter. And that fucking infuriates me. You know, that really annoys me. And that's the only message that I see getting delivered from Me Too. So only message I see them sending out. So that's their subliminal message that I'm reading into. And it's obvious, like, don't listen to what they're saying, look at their actions, and their actions speak for themselves.
100%.
Exactly. I love that.
Same. Well, again, thank you so much for coming back on our podcast, and we look forward to more conversations. If there's anything that we can do or that you need from us, even if it's a prayer, know that you're not alone. And for anyone listening, if you feel like you're alone or you need someone to talk to, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us. Feel free to contact us. We will get back to you. But again, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it.
No, thank you, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Of course. And survivors, as always, we're sending you love, light, and blessings. We hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Continue to stand in your truth and know that you're not alone.